Hello there, my name is Will Patillo. I'm here with another Unity tutorial. This one is on inheritance, specifically how to make it useful. The real value of inheritance for me is being able to avoid type checking. And this example is going to illustrate that. It's a very simple little scene here. I'll just go ahead and run it. I have two objects that are just circles. If I click on the red one, it says arf, and I click on the blue one, it says meow. I can do that multiple times, and that's it. What I have here in my scene, there's a main camera, nothing special about that. This is two-dimensional, by the way. Player, which handles the clicking, and a dog and a cat, which both have a circle collider and an all animal script, each in a enumerated type that says what it is. So this one's a cat and this one's a dog. This scene, by the way, does not use inheritance. I think it would be very helpful in illustrating this, showing the problem that inheritance solves, and by first showing some code that doesn't use it and how that can be improved. So I'll just go over this scene here. Look at the player script. That's how we're getting our input here. So this is just some basic raycasting from a mouse button. It's declaring my variables, array, and a raycast hit 2D. In update, I check for clicks of the mouse, and when that happens, I have my cast ray method. I create a ray based on camera, main, screen point to ray based on the mouse position, and then I check for see if the raycast hits anything with this line here, just from where the mouse is off into infinity. And if hit is null, then we'll skip this. But if the raycast hits something, then this if state will execute. And then we get the all animals component on the object that was hit. So if I hit this, it'll be referring to this script. If I hit this one within this collider, it'll be referring to this script. And then I call the onClick method in that allAnimal script, which is here. Now the thing is, since I have the same script applied to both animals, I'm not sure whether to bark or meow. So first thing I have to do here is I set up an enumerated type just for cleanliness. Has dog or cat, and then when the click method's called, I check which type has been assigned in the inspector, and if it's type dog, then I call this function, and if it's type cat, then I call this function. Now for example as simple as this is fine. This script is plenty small, it's not too complicated or anything. But you could imagine if I had, say, 20 different animals and they had lots of different actions they could perform under a lot of different conditions, and the actions were, more complicated than just printing a single line to the console. It was like, huge, like lots and lots of stuff, like hundreds of lines with each of these methods. You can imagine that if all of my animal behaviors are all in the same script, and then I also have to type check, this script is going to be getting just massive and totally unwieldy. And I want to head that off before it takes too much refactoring. So what I'd like to be able to do is to take all my cat behaviors, put them in one script, all my dog-specific behaviors, put them in another script, animal generic behaviors in something else. So I'm going to move to a next scene, which gets a little closer to inheritance, but still isn't using it. Sure, I'll save. So here's another scene. It does exactly the same thing. I click on the red sphere, it says arf. Click on the blue sphere, it says meow. Same setup in terms of objects, main camera. Although this time, the dog has a dog component script to it, which just has one method. It's public, so it can be called from something else. So that has it speak, it says arf. And then the cat has a cat component script, which gets it to say meow. Okay, so that's nice. I have things all separated out. The problem, though, is if I look into this event script here for the player that are clicking, okay, getting the input the same way, that's fine. But when it hits an object, I have no way of knowing whether it has this dog component script to it or this cat component. And so, since I don't know that, I could at a lot of danger of getting a null reference exception. So the way I deal with that here, which as you can see is kind of inefficient, is to use a get component. If the object has the cat component, then I call the speak method in the cat component. If the object has the dog component, then I call the speak method in the dog component. So that, I mean, that works all right, and it's good at breaking the scripts up, but I still have this really awkward and clunky type checking. It's just been moved out of the all animals into the event that's calling it. And so it's nice to break things up, but I'd really like to just get rid of all this type checking altogether, because again, you can imagine that if there's tons of different events, like all throughout my program, that could be calling one of a dozen different animals, I mean, then each of these type checks is going to get much longer, and there's going to be lots of them. There's a lot of potential to make mistakes and run into errors, so it's still far from ideal. So next script, or next scene, I'm going to actually look at something that uses inheritance. Here I am in my inheritance scene. Once again, I have the same setup of a camera, a player controller, and my dog and cat objects. If I play the scene, it still works the same way. I just bring up my console log, cat says meow, dog says arf, nice and simple. However, this time, if I look at my dog and cat objects, again, they just have individual animal-specific scripts. If I look at cat, all it has is just a single speak method where it says meow, and I'll explain this override in a moment. This time, it's inheriting from class animal. Dog is the same way. It inherits from animal, has a speak method. It actually is kind of important here, though, that these have the same name. If I go into this animal component, animal script that they both inherit from, again, this is also very simple. It just has this public virtual void, and I'll explain the virtual keyword in a moment, that says speak here. And that animal script is not attached to anything in the scene. It is just something that the cat and dog scripts inherit from. Now, if I look in player, you can start to see the value of this. So this is all the same as before, just getting the mouse click and casting an array. So is this, sending the array cast. And now if it's hit, then I simply call get component animal and call the speak function. Because the assumption that I can make here is that if I click on this object, for example, I don't know whether it has a dog or a cat component, but I know that it has an animal component, or that it inherits from animal. So what happens is, say I click here, the player gains a reference to animal, which acts effectively as a switchboard. It just picks whichever derived class that is attached that has the speak function, and it calls the appropriate one. So this one, since the dog component was attached, it calls this method here. Whereas if I click here, again, it's the call from the click goes to animal, but then this delegates down to cat, and it says meow. So as you can see here, I have all the benefits of being able to break this up into multiple different scripts, have each animal do its own thing, while at the same time there's no type checking anywhere, either on the input side or on the receiving end. And the reason for that is because of inheritance, this virtual method right here. And this is something that confused me for a long time. Like, what is the point of having a virtual method that effectively has nothing inside of it? You know, an empty function. That's not only that, a void one that receives no arguments. And the reason for it is so it can be overridden. And that's what this override keyword is. The idea of a virtual function is a function that is meant to be overridden by a derived class or something that inherits from it. And in order to access this function here, the derived class needs this override keyword in order to get access to it. That, in a nutshell, is the really nice value of inheritance. And I can continue this down, like if I had many different types of dog, I could replace this with another virtual function and then have that delegate down to, say, a Lhasa Apso or a Chihuahua or a Dachshund or whatever else, and just chain the inheritance as far as I like. So it can be very powerful. And all you have to do to make that happen, one is just remember to say what it's inheriting from. Use this override if it's necessary. If there's that's not always going to be the case. So sometimes if you have methods in your delegates for which that's not shared between everything, then you can just have methods that are specific to dog, you know, such as private void chase tail as an example. So this is something that I wouldn't just put in animal since it's not shared between all the animals, and it wouldn't exist in cat. Here in cat I might say private void act aloof as an example of something that's just unique to a cat class. But all the things that are shared between them I can put up here, and the methods don't have to be empty. They can actually do stuff, in which case those methods say public void walk. If I want walk to be the same between all animals, that can just be called from these derived classes or from elsewhere in the code, and it'll work it'll work the same for all animal types. But this is the key lesson that I wanted to cover, is this idea of using a inheritance or the abstract class as a switchboard, so that when you're calling it, you don't need to know what specific components are attached to your objects in order to get references to them, as long as you know what you're looking for on the level that it has in common. So anyway, I hope you found that useful. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments, or any other points that you have, corrections, and so on. Also, if you have suggestions or things you'd like to see in a future tutorial, feel free to comment on those as well below. If you liked this video and found it helpful, don't forget to like and subscribe to make these a little bit more visible. And until next time, I'm Will Patillo, signing out.